Continuing this conversation on the PsychFORM study, how do parents raise teenagers, future college students? How do they raise them to be confident in their biblical worldview and unafraid to share that worldview with peers and professors alike? Well, here now to share more about this is Dr. Jeff Myers, who is the president of Summit Ministries. Dr. Myers, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always an honor to have you, my friend.
It's an honor to be on your show. I love this show, love the work of Family Research Council. And Jody, you're a great stand-in host.
Well, thank you very much. I earned you extra brownie points. But listen, this is an incredible study here. I hope you were able to see the conversation I just had with Kevin Waldman. Are you surprised that so many college kids are mindlessly spouting ideas that they don't even themselves actually believe?
No, I am not surprised at all. I thought your interview with Kevin Waldman was fantastic. I'm glad that in the psychological sciences, he's developed a sort of language for describing what's actually happening. But parents have known this for a long time. Conservative-oriented students have known this for a long time. But he talks about students performing based on what they think the professor's expectations are, rather than learning to think. And the way he described it, that they're being scripted from a young age, is powerful and terrifying. What we found over time, and you probably have heard this saying before, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. So these universities think they are indoctrinating the entire next generation to be just like them, when in fact they may not be doing any such thing.
Yeah, great point. And I likewise was struck deeply emotionally when he talked about how they're being scripted in all of this. What do you think is causing these college students to at least spout these woke beliefs that they themselves don't believe in? I mean, could this be a symptom of these college kids themselves not having a solid biblical worldview before they go to college? What's behind all of this, do you think?
Yeah, so there's several things happening here, Jody. I think the last point is one we should probably mention first. It is really significant. This is why we do the work we do at Summit Ministries, to help young adults develop a biblical worldview and to understand the counterfeit worldviews they'll be facing and learn how to talk about them before they head off to a college or university. If they don't have that happen, when they start hearing all of these crazy views that their family members don't believe, they start to become, they develop what the Apostle James called a divided mind. Because on the one hand, they're thinking, this is not what I learned growing up. On the other hand, they're thinking, well, my professor has a PhD. Maybe my parents are wrong. And so it sort of puts a divide in between them and their families. If you've talked about all of this ahead of time and you know these attacks are coming, then you're not as compelled by them. In fact, you're in a way inoculated against them. And that is extremely important for parents to be able to do this. But the second part of your question is just the normal thing for kids to ask, what do I need to do to succeed in this situation? And if the impression they're getting is what I need to do in this situation in my class is to stop thinking and just learn to repeat whatever my professor says, they are not getting an education. They're not getting an education. The definition of education is to lead out of, which means to lead out of ignorance. They are being schooled, but they are not being educated if they are not having the opportunity to examine different viewpoints and actually dialogue honestly about them.
Very well said, and that just makes me think more and more. Let me ask you this: are there potential spiritual consequences for repeating, for verbalizing, for articulating ideas that you don't believe in?
Oh, of course, yes, because what you're learning is to become an unethical person. You are learning to respond to what is happening around you rather than taking a stand for what is true. If you ask young adults today, do you think if you were living in the 1850s that you would have been opposed to slavery? And 100% of them say yes. But then if you ask them, well, give me an example of an ethical issue where you've actually personally sacrificed for a viewpoint, they can't give you one. Right. So they sort of assume that they can think by looking in the rearview mirror, and that isn't what they really need to do. They need to be prepared by their parents to know that even though your professor is not going to reward you for this, you need to figure out how to articulate the truth and do it with evidence. Then you use the classroom to sharpen yourself, not just to go along. The second one has serious negative consequences for your soul. The first one has serious positive consequences for your soul. Learn to stand, learn to think, become resilient. And if you get nothing else out of college than that, then it could be worth your while, even if you're in an environment that promotes stupidity.
Yeah. And you know, it just seems to me that even if you don't believe something, if you are verbalizing it, if you are writing it, that there's something that takes place there that whether you realize it or not, there's a degree, a sense in which you are taking ownership of that because you are arguing in behalf of it. And that just puts an individual on dangerous soil spiritually, it seems to me.
I think that's a really interesting point. You know, in addition to that, it develops kind of a cynicism. Say, well, you know, the only thing you have to do at this university is just to say whatever they want you to say to get ahead. But parents, listen to me. You're paying $80,000 a year for this. You can have your child indoctrinated for a whole lot less money by just watching videos on YouTube or TikTok. Save your $240,000, $300,000. I'm just being tongue in cheek, obviously there. But the point is, if if we can help you at Summit Ministries, we want to do it. But we want to help young adults learn to think, and they have to learn the truth of a biblical worldview. We give them the facts. We're not trying to cram anything down their throats. We expose them to the counterfeit worldviews because you actually learn more about the truth when you're looking at the ways it has been manipulated and people use propaganda to try to move you away from it. And then finally, you learn to talk to people who have different viewpoints. If you can learn those things, then even a very liberal college environment can sometimes turn to your benefit. I certainly experienced that when I was in my doctoral program. I was all alone in believing the beliefs that I had, I thought, until I began to eventually just ask questions and articulate them in class. And all of a sudden I realized, oh, out of the 25 of us in our doctoral program, there are 7 believing Christians, but none of them would have ever said anything had I not been the first to ask the professor a question that showed I was skeptical of the dogma we were being presented.
Well, that's awesome. So what are some questions that you would recommend for parents and teens to discuss about when it comes to deciding what college, whether it be Christian or secular college, to attend? What are some questions they need to think about and talk about?
Well, one question is, I want to ask, what does a good education look like? I'm going to be asking that of the admissions reps. They probably won't know, but you got to visit the campus. You got to talk to professors who are in your field of potential interest. What does an educated person look like in this situation? I think you can just come right out and say, hey, look, I know there was a study recently about people assuming progressive views. Is that what you expect of students, or do you expect them to learn to examine 2 opposing viewpoints and honestly articulate the difference? What protections do you have of students against psychological manipulation? Because a lot of times it's not just in the classroom, Jody, it's in the residence hall. You go to your residence hall and all of a sudden they've got you doing these psychological studies where you're supposed to confess that you're a racist or whatever. And it's psychological manipulation. The students need to be prepared. Okay, I'm engaging in a psychological study here. Plainly, I need to have a permission form so that you can psychologically analyze me. If there's no permission form, then what you're doing is against the law. At each university, there's an institutional review board. Anybody who's doing anything that's psychologically manipulative has to have it passed by the institutional review board, which is an official committee at the university. And you can just ask, hey, look, you're having us do this anti-racism exercise. Can you show me the permission slip that you have from the Institutional Review Board to conduct this? So there are those sorts of questions. Jody, in class, there are a whole other series of questions you ask, just starting with how do you know that? What do you mean by that? How do you know that's true? Where did you get your information? Those kinds of basic things in class break the spell and sometimes allow other students to come to your side in creating a fair and balanced discussion.
That's awesome. All right, final question. We've only got about a minute. Does Summit Ministry have some resources for parents and teens on the issue of developing a biblical worldview?
We absolutely do. This summer, we're having 2-week-long intensives in Colorado and in South Carolina where students 16 to 22 years of age can join us, study with us with the top Christian thought leaders of our day, ask all of your hard questions. We don't ignore any question. We're not afraid of any question the students bring. So that's one thing, summit.org, you can check that out. Also, while you're at summit.org, you can see that we have a whole series of web articles, videos, things like that can help young adults answer some of the big questions they have coming up. There's always an balance between truth and a relationship. Your goal is not to humiliate your professor or your classmates. Your goal is to be a learner who helps lead other people to the truth.
Thank you, Dr. Jeff Myers, Summit Ministries, summit.org. Thanks for joining us on Washington Watch.